My name is Andra Thurton, and I am the event planner at the Ajax Pickering Board of Trade. So you're aware, we are recording this session. All of our events are, up to this point at least, have been recorded. It's available on our COVID page. If you go to our homepage, apboardoftrade.com, you'll see the big tab COVID, and our previous recordings and this session will be included as well. Lorna is a bit about Lorna. She's an international executive coach and trainer who brings her years of as a serial entrepreneur to business and professionals to help them grow to the next level. She's a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and a founding member of the John Maxwell Certification Program, and a faculty member teaching John Maxwell teams members all around the world on how to build a business. She's on the John Maxwell team. She is on the John Maxwell Team President's Advisory Council and serves as executive committee for PAC. She is also the past president of the board of directors of Durham Workforce Authority. She has served on a number of other boards and committees, including Toastmasters. Lorna is a longtime member as well of the Ajax Pickering Board of Trade, very much engaged with us. And some of you may know her, some of you, it's maybe your first time.
And some of you may not recognize me without my hat, but it feels really wearing the hat in the house.
That's what's under there. Okay.
That's what's under there. Absolutely. Yeah, there is hair under there.
Over to you, Lorna.
Thank you so much. Now you don't have to stare at this face the whole time. I do have a PowerPoint. So I am gonna ask to share my screen. If I get the right one. And we don't have sound, so let's just do this.
Perfect.
Come on. And there we go. You guys can see that now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to thank you, Andra, for this opportunity, and I really want to thank all of you for taking the time for being here today. I know some of us don't have a lot to do, but we still have a lot to do. We have our own businesses to tend to. I'm honored and excited to really spend this time together and talk about this crisis and leading through crisis. And I want to talk to you about that title. Really is, how do you lead yourself? What do you do when challenging times really challenge you? And I want you to think about that, because you might be thinking, well, I'm not a leader, but in fact, I want you to really understand that yes, you are a leader, whether you're leading yourself or other people. There's people around you that you influence. You might be thinking, I just want to get through this, and so I just want to get through this crisis. But what I'm going to share with you today will help you shift your mindset and think and realize that what you do influences everyone around you, and that makes you a leader. Now, I'd love to share more with you on what we can do, and really this is a big topic, and it's not like we're going anywhere. We could spend several weeks going into this and really dive down into each of the principles, but I want to respect your time, and Andra only gave me an hour, so I want to make sure that I give you as much as I can in the time that we have today. If you want to go into this material deeper, I will talk about how you can do that. There's an opportunity. I do have discussion groups going weekly to really dive into and share about how we're feeling, how we're doing, how we're coping, and how we can get better. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to get better in a crisis. Now, what I'm going to share with you, whoops, and there it goes. Okay, try again. It wasn't supposed to do that. All right. So today I'm going to talk to you. What are you doing? Okay. No. All right. It doesn't want to do this. Let's do this. How's this? Okay. So what I want to talk to you today is about how to be better in a crisis. What I'm going to share with you is what I've learned from John Maxwell. Now, for those of you that don't know who he was, he's a leadership expert that many of the world's leaders turn to, especially right now in crisis. Until everything got shut down, he actually was scheduled to talk to and teach at the Vatican this April for the Pope and speak to the cardinals there about leadership. So he has influence with many of the leaders around the world. So he talks to literally tens of thousands of leaders every day, or at least he did until he got shut down. Well, I'd love to share with you today a little bit more about what we can do really. Hang on, he's being stupid again. Okay. How we can be a little more present and a little bit more intentional about what we're doing. I'm going to talk to you about the practical ways of how we can think into this crisis, how we can do things differently, and then maybe take a deeper dive. I'm going to go through some short points to start with, and then I'll go into them a little bit deeper in a minute. But today, I want to talk to you about how to get better in a crisis. And as I said, I want you to realize that maybe you're thinking, I'm not a leader, but as I said, you are. The way we define leadership here at the John Maxwell team is leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And you have to understand that you influence someone. You influence everyone around you by the way you behave in your actions and your thoughts and the way you express yourself. But leadership is about influence. And I love what John Maxwell says. He says everything rises and falls on leadership. And especially in a crisis, everything rises and falls on leadership even more. So if you're a good leader in a crisis, if you're leading yourself and others well, it does help you. You're not going to fall as fast as a bad leader. If you're a bad leader, if you're not really good at leading yourself and others, then you're going to drag your team and others down much faster than if you're a good leader. If you're a good leader, well, it's not necessarily going to be a down. It might not rise, but it might not rise as much. As a good leader, you might be just tasked with holding the course, just steady as she goes to get through this storm so that you can then rise above it afterwards. But as I said, everything really does rise and fall on leadership. And the main difference between good and bad leaders is you can see it more so in a crisis. A crisis really shows us who we are. It really reveals who we are. It brings out what is on the inside. So my goal for you here today is I simply want to spend some time together to learn about what a crisis really is so that we can lead better through this. And it's really going to be a lesson on perspective. Just remember that. And I will come back to that thought later. But how we view things is how we do things. So perspective is really important. And the only difference is that if I'm a follower, how I view things determines how I do things. And it just involves me. But when I'm a leader, when I influence other people, how I view things is how I do things, but that involves others too. So we have to be good stewards of ourselves. We have to manage ourselves and lead ourselves first. So let's start with, what is a crisis? Well, the dictionary calls a crisis as a time of intense difficulty or danger. Now, in the medical field, a crisis is often referred to as a turning point. If the patient is going through a crisis, either they are going to get better or it's going to get worse for them. Now, if you look at the Greek language and how they define crisis, and they call it a decision. So when you look at the three there, the dictionary definition, the medical definition, and the Greek definition, and basically I put it this way: a crisis is a time of intense difficulty requiring a decision that will be a turning point. So this crisis that we're facing right now, it's an intense time of difficulty. Yes, it's a turning point for us and an opportunity for us to make different decisions. One of the things I was reading an article the other day is that crisis really helps us find clarity. It really helps us focus on what's important. And that's where we're going to make our decisions, is what is really, really important. And that's why I'm sharing with you today why a crisis, leading through crisis, is so important. Because as a leader, as just an individual, we make a difference in the lives of the people around us. Everyone can make a difference. You see, Max De Pree said it this way. He said, the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. And this reality is a crisis. I'm not denying that. We need to take it seriously. We need to do everything in our power to make sure that we do the things necessary so that we're able to slow the spread down, to stop it, and to turn things around. We have to do what we need to do to protect and move forward. We can rebuild the economy. We can't rebuild a life that is lost. So let's get started. How do you and I become a leader in a bad situation? How do we be a better leader in a difficult crisis? Well, let me give you some simple thoughts to begin with, and then I'll go a bit deeper. First of all, if you want to be a good leader and help people through a crisis, your number one priority is put people first. Now, it's easy because our number one priority as a leader is always, in good times or bad, to put people first. But in this case, with the COVID-19, it's the safety of the people. See, what leaders know is that when they take on that mantle of leadership, that it's about the people. It's not about me. It's not about my rights. I put that aside when I step up to becoming a leader. It's about you. And to me, it's the same thing as being a parent. Once you have kids, you give up a lot of your rights to do whatever you want because you have responsibility for another life. And as a leader, it's all about how I can help you, how I can serve you, and how I can lift you. Now, whether that is leading your family, leading your friends, maybe leading your clients or your vendors, how can I help you? Put people first. You know, my prayers are with the people that have already been infected. I've lost friends to this already. It's a difficult time for everyone. And with everything that I'm saying today, I don't want you to minimize the crisis that we're in. We are in a world crisis. I don't want to minimize the role of leadership that it plays in this crisis either. The role that you can play in this crisis. Because you can help other people get through this. And not only get through it, but become better because of it. If you're leading people in a crisis, the first priority is always about the people. If you're not in a crisis, good news. As a leader, your priority is still to put people first. It's all about them. But I see there's so many times when a leader will put themselves over others in a crisis, and that just multiplies the pain for everyone. It's just wrong. It really is. It's just wrong. So the second thing is leaders need to educate themselves. To be a good leader in a crisis, we need to really understand what the issues are. And there's a lot of uncertainty around COVID and what's going on. But I'm talking about knowing and educating to the best of our ability and making sure the resources, the sources that we are using are valid sources. Okay, there is a lot of nasty stuff, false information out there on the internet. Make sure that you are going to reliable sources like the World Health Organization and the CDC, to news and beware of even the news media, because they all have an agenda. They want headlines. They want eyes on. So they are more inclined to use sensational news to get your attention. But it's not always completely grounded in fact. Make sure you have a good source, a reliable source for your information. Don't buy into all the negativity that you're seeing on social media. It's really easy to fall down that rabbit hole. Now, let me just say a few encouraging things about the COVID. First of all, we know what the virus is. You see, back in the 80s, when AIDS came out, it took almost 2 years for us to understand that, identify that it was the HIV virus that was causing it. It took 2 whole years for them to figure that out. With COVID-19, it was literally a week. On December 31st was the day they issued the first report in China. They identified it. By January 7th, so a week later, the virus had been identified. So we are not battling the unknown. We already know what it is. And I want to encourage that. To me, that's encouraging, because it's hard to fight what we don't know, but we do know what it is. We also know how to detect the virus. We have tests since January 13th of this year. We've literally had tests available. They might not be widely available, but we do have tests available to test, and that is progress. There's many cases that have no symptoms or very mild symptoms. And to me, that's good news, that the COVID-19 is not a death sentence. It is serious, but there are many people who have very mild symptoms or no symptoms, or are able to fully recover. There's some other facts. There's relatively few cases of people under 20, which is a good sign. The mortality rate under 40 is also quite low. So as I said, it's not a death sentence. And here's the big news. The virus can be wiped clean from surfaces. That's really good. We can disinfect our surfaces. Science is on this globally. They are studying. Back in 2003, when we had the SARS epidemic, it took over a year for us to get as much information on SARS as we currently have on COVID. So they are working vigorously day and night to find the root of it, to find the cause, to find ways to eradicate it, to help those that are suffering from it. They are on this. Number 3, be flexible. This to me is really, really key, because with crisis there is a lot of uncertainty, and it causes a lot of change. Now, John wrote a book about 1.5 years ago called Leadership. And the whole theme of the book is how to be adaptable and adjustable and flexible, so that you can, as you're moving and leading your people, when plan A isn't working, you can go to plan B. And in a crisis, well, that might even include a plan C or even a plan D. But flexibility is very, very important for leaders and for ourselves when this time of crisis, because things are changing on a daily basis. Being flexible helps us avoid some of the landmines and lead others around them. Number 4, leverage your team. In other words, use your team, use the people around you, bring them together, bring others around you, because together we have the same mission but different perspectives. You know, it's as simple as that. One of us is not as smart as all of us. So if I'm just doing this by myself, I'm going to have a very limited amount of ideas and very limited amount of resources. But if I bring others around us, if I lean on others, I'm going to have a lot more resources, a lot more ideas, and a lot more support. So reach out to others. They give me different perspectives. They give me different support. Number 5, and I think this is a big one, is communicate judiciously more than continually. So now judiciously is a rather big word, but I think it suits this the best because it means using good judgment. In other words, do less talking and more thinking, more listening. And when you communicate, make sure you communicate with thought behind it. Make sure you're using discernment there. I know for me, I tend to blurt things out that maybe I shouldn't say. But in times like this, I'm much more aware of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, especially out there on social media. Because, as I said, we influence others even if we don't realize it. People don't need more communication, but what they do need is wise communication. So be aware of what you're sharing. Be aware of the words that you're using. Number 6, be authentic. Authenticity is what people need in leadership. They want that even more than perfection. You don't want to do it, they don't want you to do it perfectly. They just want you to be real with them. And I think that's a leader's greatest asset, is to be authentic. When you're authentic, people love you. Even when you screw up, when you're authentic about it, that you're human, that you make mistakes, they love you for that. People believe you more. And guess what? They trust you more when you're authentic. So what I say about being authentic in a leadership or in my leadership, what am I saying? First, tell the truth. Don't try and sugarcoat everything or avoid responsibility, as we see some leaders do. You don't have to have all the answers. In fact, no leader has all the answers, really. To me, I don't know if there's anything scarier than a leader that's pretending to have all of the answers, especially during difficult times or uncertain times or any time, really. Do the right thing. That's an authentic leader. But here's the thing, you need to keep your head above the crowd too. You want to be with the people, be where they're at, but you want to be above the crowd. If your head's not above the crowd, then you're not seeing the big picture here. You're just seeing the crowd. When you see the crowd, you don't want to just follow the crowd. You have to be authentic. You have to be continually looking at the big picture. That's what they want from you. Help me see what you don't see. And then finally, as I said at the beginning, is manage yourself. People ask me, they say, what's the most difficult thing about leadership? And to me, the most challenging part about leadership is leading myself. It's easy. Oh man, is it easy to tell you what to do? Any parent will tell you, yeah, sure, do this, do what I say, not what I do. It's easy to speak to hundreds of people and tell them what to do. But trust me, it's much harder to make myself do the right thing. And so the best thing that I can do is manage myself, lead myself first. And I think during this crisis, it means doing things like social distancing, restricting how many times I go outside how many times I go out into public. Am I just going into the store just for essentials? Am I making sure that when I am out, that I am keeping my distance, that I am respecting everybody else's space? So it really is about being the example for others to follow, managing myself so I can lead others. So let me share with you 5 observations about a crisis. I want I want us to see crisis in the right perspective, because it really is about that. We're starting to manage the logistics, working from home, and how do we do that with the internet, and how do we starting to get a bit of a pace, a rhythm to our day. And now it has become more of a mental game. We're into week 5 of isolation, and some of us are really starting to climb the walls here. We gotta get out. So it is about our perspective, how we are thinking is what it's a mental game to keep us going until we get to the end. So let me just give you 5 observations about a crisis. First and foremost, crisis is quite common. This is not the first crisis we've ever experienced on Earth. There's a tendency in a crisis to think that this is it. This is the big one, and it's not a positive way of looking at things. There's a tendency to think that nothing has ever been this bad before, and we're the only ones that have ever experienced it. But now most of us have never experienced a crisis like this in our lifetime. However, we don't have to go back very far to see that we have been very lucky up until now. I only have to go back as far as my grandparents to see what they went through in their lifetime, starting with World War I. And that followed on the heels was the Spanish flu, and then the economic crash in 1929, and followed by the dirty 30s of the Great Depression. And just as they were beginning to recover from that, the world plunged yet again into global conflict of World War II. Then there was the polio epidemic and the Cuban Missile Crisis of the early 60s, when everyone thought we were again on the brink of a nuclear war. There was the FLQ crisis in the 70s, and the oil crisis in the mid-70s that saw the cost of oil skyrocket by 400% in a matter of months. Now that's just the ones that affected us here in North America. Then there was the famine in Bangladesh that saw 1.5 million people die of starvation and disease. The famine in Ethiopia that sparked the Live Aid concert in 1985. There was the genocide in Rwanda, and a few years later in another genocide in Bosnia and Croatia. More recently, we had the Syrian refugee crisis of 2015-2016 that saw Canada take in over 25,000 people fleeing from the war zone that their homeland had become. The double whammy for us in this crisis, though, is both a health crisis that then triggered an economic crisis. And that is impacting everyone all around the world. So it's very possible for us to over-exaggerate our place in history and the crisis that we're in, and that the place in history that crisis represents. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I often talk about that there's no 2 good consecutive days in a leader's life. And honestly, I think that's quite true. I think as leaders, we deal with so many issues. And it's not just leaders that have to deal with issues. We all have so many problems that there is rarely 2 easy problem-free days in a row. But a crisis means that there is much more than 2 bad days in a row. In fact, with a crisis, it's a whole bunch of bad days piling on each other. They just keep coming and coming and coming. And in 2020, with the COVID-19, that's where we are now. And I'm not trying to minimize the virus at all. I'm not trying to make fun of it. Just that when we are in a crisis, the tendency is to think that it's never been this bad before, at least not for us. But I want you to know that It has been this bad before for other people. You know, would you rather be back in 1918 when the flu was killing at one time 1 million people every week? We have so much more of an advantage over it now. We have the healthcare system that they didn't have in 1918. We have science that they didn't have back in 1918. We have communication that they didn't have back in 1918. But I'm saying that with a crisis, we tend to think it's the worst ever. It's because we're going through it. It's kind of like the difference between minor surgery and major surgery. Minor surgery is when you're having surgery. Major surgery is when I'm the one going through surgery. Minor crisis is what happened 10 years ago or 100 years ago or in another country or on another continent. But a major crisis, that's what we're going through right now. But this time, it is worldwide. And the reason I'm saying this, and I want to make sure that I'm clear here, is that leaders always give the right perspective. They don't have all the answers, but they do recognize the reality, and they put the right perspective on that reality for everyone else. A good leader's perspective is what gives hope, security, and encouragement. I remember growing up as a kid, and I would have nightmares, and I would wake up and go downstairs and crawl into my dad's lap until I fell asleep again. There was something, it was just his presence, calming, getting that secure feeling that it's going to be okay. I was grounded then. And I'd fall asleep and he'd carry me back up to bed, and I'd wake up in my bed in the next morning and not know how I got there. But it was just that leader's presence. His presence that helped me get through that. And that's what we can do for others. See? Back in 1918, with the Spanish flu, it affected 25 million people, and over 25 weeks, it killed millions. 25% of the world's population was infected with that flu, right after the heels of World War I, where thousands upon thousands of people had died. Those were really dark days. But it always reminds me of the old phrase, "This too shall pass." Sorry about that. This too shall pass. And it's something that really to hold on to in bad times, but it also sobers us up in good times. Because guess what? This too shall pass. We want the good times to last forever, but I can tell you, when things are at their very best and your business is going great and your health is going great and your family is doing well, guess what? This too shall pass. Life never stays the same. Change is the only constant in life. Come on. There we go. So the second observation about a crisis is that it can be distracting. There's so many other things just screaming for our attention. Now, I use the term distraction or distraction, and I want to draw your attention to the word traction, because traction is the opposite of distraction. You see, traction means to pull forward or to draw forward. It means there's a momentum and a move in the right direction. When you're gaining traction, you're making progress, right? And distraction is the opposite. It means to pull away. So when it comes to a crisis, that it begins to distract us. It takes us off course. It can confuse our priorities. It can keep us from making progress. So if traction is the action that draws us towards what we want in life, distraction are the actions that pull us away from the things that we want in our life. If you want to get distracted, just watch the news or spend some time on Facebook, right? I really honestly think we could take a break from all of that. In fact, I have for the most part, because there is just so much clamoring for my attention, and it's not always positive. Because as I said, their agenda, it's not always about accurate reporting. It's about getting our attention. They've got an agenda behind what they do. They need our attention in order to sell their sponsorship spots, to sell their commercials, to sell their products. And yeah, we have to do the same for ours, but that doesn't mean we have to scream at them to get their attention. I sincerely hope that you are putting the people first when you are talking to them, that you are not being tone deaf to where they are in their own situations. I know for myself, this is exactly what I'm doing. I am doing so many more free courses and free stuff right now because I know I can help people, and I know that they might not be in a position to buy right now. I just want to help you. It's not about, a 2-year program. Let's just get through the next 2 weeks. How can I help you get through the next 2 weeks? And keeping the people first and foremost, front and center, will help you stay in that position of influence, because there's not much of a difference between manipulating people and motivating them. Manipulating people is when I move you for my advantages. And so many times in a crisis, that's what we see people doing. And to me, it's just wrong. It's wrong for leaders to do it. It's wrong for politicians to do it. It's wrong for the media to do it. But when we put people first, when we have no agenda except to lift people, to serve people, to add value to people and help them, it helps us maintain some sort of traction and avoid becoming distractions. So what happens when we have distraction? What do? Well, our mind starts to wander. We begin to ask questions like, what could happen if, and what if? And once we begin to ask questions that there are no good answers to, or cause negative thinking, where everything is going wrong and it's never going to get better, or it increases feelings of uncertainty and anxiety, where we begin to look around and we begin to be dominated by fear. And fear is not a good place to be making decisions. And this crisis is a perfect storm for this fear. It's a perfect storm of distraction and fear, because I think fear is spreading faster than the virus itself. But let me say this, and I want to say this as put it in a way that as best I can, is that just because your sky is falling doesn't mean my sky is falling. Are we in the same crisis? Yes. Are we in the same danger? Yes, absolutely. Are we in this same storm? Absolutely. But do we have the same perspective? Possibly not. There are businesses that are thriving, that are doing really well. Their services are in demand. I don't think I have ever been busier than what I am right now. But honestly, my life is good. As far as my agenda is concerned, my life has gone to pieces. My priorities are shifting right now. I'm a speaker, and April, May, and even into June now, all those speaking engagements, they're gone. I'm not speaking anywhere except for maybe like this virtually. Besides, who wants to be with a crowd of people right now? I don't want to be in the middle of a crowd. Not until we've taken care of this COVID. So somebody asked me the other day, what are you doing? And they said, what are you doing right now? What are you doing with your time? And I said, well, I'm making lemonade. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, right? So what am I doing? I'm speaking sometimes virtually. And yeah, there's a financial fallout for that. Absolutely. And there's a financial fallouts of all kinds from that. But I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on what I can control. I can't control that. Nothing will cause you more anxiety than trying to control something you cannot control. Some seem to think that somehow that worry will make things better for them, but trust me, it doesn't. So what am I doing with my time? Well, I'm writing lessons on this content, leading through crisis and turning adversity into advantage. I'm working with coaching clients to help them pivot in their business and lead them through this crisis. I'm reaching out to others who just need someone to listen to them, someone to be there for them and ready to listen and help them, point them maybe in the direction of the resources that they need. I can give you a whole list of things that I'm working on right now. So what do leaders do during a crisis? Leaders help people get traction. They help them focus on what they need, what actions they do need to take to keep moving forward. So the third observation about a crisis is that it reveals what's inside of us. You see, sometimes I hear people say they were made in a crisis. Well, truth be told, crisis doesn't make us. Crisis reveals us. When a crisis comes, whatever is on the inside will come out. When you squeeze an orange, what do you get? Orange juice, right? When you squeeze a lemon, what do you get? You get lemon juice, right? When a human being is squeezed, what's on the inside, either positive or negative, will come out. You see, choices make us, and crisis reveals us. And I want you to really understand this because we have control over our choices. Let me say that again. We have control over our choices. We don't control our conditions, but we do control our choices. And if you're leading others, if you're influencing others, I want you to understand, you can't moan and lead at the same time. If you're going to lead, you have to be able to give people hope, and moaning doesn't give people hope. Complaining about the situation doesn't give people hope. Leaders find a way to move forward. Now, most people find strength in things that are outside of them. They find reassurance in that. And that's a problem, more so now than ever because of the crisis. If I find strength in things that are outside of me, I'm going to have a problem. Things like money, power, titles, wardrobe, cars. That's not what makes me strong. That's not what makes me a leader. The most of the things that make a true leader are on the inside. Integrity, wisdom, confidence, vulnerability, passion, compassion, intuition. These things come to life from life experience, from life's trials, from the deepest part of who you are. And you can't fake them. You can't buy them because they're not for sale. My mentor, John Maxwell, says that life asks a question of every person that gauges their effectiveness and wisdom. And the question is, What have you been through? Where are your battle scars? I've learned that this is where the authenticity really counts. That the best route to an authentic life is through your scars, your broken bits. That's who you are. That's what made you who you are. It's that history of loss that really teaches us life lessons. It also teaches us not to take ourselves so seriously, not to get seduced by the short-term materialism. In other words, loss helps ground us and mature us as a person. Crisis gives us clarity. Crisis gives us wisdom. And there's a hard lesson in life setbacks. Just like steel is forged through the heat of fire, leaders are forged through loss. There can be no strength, no real inner growth without the pain of legitimate suffering. So I know it sounds trite, but it's a scientific fact. You can't have a rainbow without a storm. Loss creates wisdom. Now, acquired early, huge loss can translate into wisdom acquired early. So that's the good news. You can learn from this. You can be stronger from this if you are willing to learn. Wisdom comes from dealing with your mess, all of it. But this is what I run into all the time. Do people want to deal with that? A lot don't, because it's too much work. It's too hard. They don't want to acknowledge it. It's too much remembering all that pain. But that's where life's lessons are. And I found that there's a freedom to doing this work, to surrendering and saying, yes, it happened, but it doesn't have to define me. There's an old saying, and I love this one. I've followed this one for years, and it's, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. I made a mistake. I'm not the mistake. But here's the thing, transformation doesn't happen from something on the outside. It happens on the inside. It's a values issue. When people learn and live out good values, guess what? They become more valuable to themselves and more valuable to their neighbors, to those around them. The result is they become bigger on the inside than they are on the outside. And that's what we're striving for. Through difficulty, through crisis, we're striving to become bigger on the inside than we are on the outside. So we can face anything that comes at us and not shrink from us, not shrink from it. In her book, Mindset, Carol Dweck talks about the difference between the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. The growth mindset sees challenges as an opportunity to learn something. The fixed mindset sees challenges as they fear it. They don't want to embrace it. They're scared of it. So taking on that growth mindset and what can we learn from this takes back control of things that we can control. When we focus on what we can control, we take back our power. So number 4 requires adaptability. You see, crisis usually is a case of, it's usually a case study in uncertainty. And really, if nothing else, we can see how uncertain everything is right now. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. Every day is a new surprise, every week. What's new here, and how have things changed? Things are changing rapidly. That's what happens in a crisis. Nobody knows how long this outbreak is going to last or how bad it is going to be. But this is where leadership comes in. You know, if you look at sports, good coaches have a good pregame plan. In other words, they go into the game with a plan and how they would like the game to unfold. And they practice that plan before the game. They teach the pregame plan But once that game starts, it may not be the that pregame plan quite often gets put to the sidelines. So good coaches have a pregame plan, but the really great coaches, they separate themselves once the game starts, because now they've seen the reality of how the other team is playing, and they're not going on just theory anymore. Now they know what has happened and thought into, and not just what could happen. So they can go back into the locker room at halftime, and what do? They adjust the plan. It's their ability to change based on what they know is happening, to make decisions based on what they know now, not what they planned before the game. It's their ability to be flexible and adaptable and create an environment that allows a new game plan, a plan B, if you will. And that's what great coaches are made of. And most successful people, most successful leaders are the same. They have a plan B. And during a crisis, that might even be a plan C or a plan D. And that's the biggest difference. And as I said, John teaches this in his book, Leadership. There's a profound difference, a big difference between conformity and adaptability. Conformity is really a negative quality. That's about blending in. It's about following the crowd, of being like everybody else. And that really is a weakness based on the fear of rejection. When people conform, it's usually because they don't want to be rejected. So they blend in. And as a leader, especially in business, it's not a positive thing. Adaptability is a positive quality, though, and that's about adjusting. Not out of weakness, but out of strength. It's adjusting to succeed. It's getting a lay of the land and adjusting your course. Tom Watson is an incredible golfer who has won a lot of tournaments. He's one of the top 10 golfers ever. And he said that there are only 5 tournaments that on the first tee on the very first day, he knew he was going to win because his swing was just that good. He said all of the other tournaments, come the second round, the third round, the fourth round, he had to go back to the driving range and he had to make adjustments because his swing was out of kilter. And I kind of like that phrase. It's one I'd use myself. He said that he had to adjust his way to victory. Almost all of his tournament wins were not because he just kept doing the same thing over and over again the same way and it was just perfect. He had to adjust himself in a crisis. And that's what's demanded of us as leaders, to help other people adjust their way to victory. How do we help them adjust what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're saying, how they're being? Maybe you need to say to yourself or to your team in your next meeting, I think I want to adjust my way. I want to adapt my way through this crisis, but I want to be flexible. I'm going to be fluid and adapt. So the 5th point is that a crisis is the time when real leaders show up. Remember I said in a crisis, that's what's on the inside shows up. Well, in a crisis, real leaders become visible. Leadership is a visible presence. And here's something that really gives great security about people. When they see their leader, when it gives them confidence, there's a calmness and assuredness and the hope that the leader has. There's a transference of certainty. And that's what people need. That's what our families need. They need to know that it's going to be okay. We are going to figure this out. It might not look the way we thought it was going to look, but we can figure this out. We can get better in order to get through this. John Maxwell says that as a leader knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And that's That's really what leaders do. They show up during the crisis. They're right there. They're early and they're first, and they lead the way forward. You see, there's time-tested principles of a leader in crisis. And in fact, they're open, they're honest, they're clear, and they're present. They're the ones that stand up and stand out. That's what leaders do in a crisis. They say, follow me. This is the way. They show up early. They show up before others. They're out in front, and they're highly visible in a crisis. Why is that? Because when leadership is needed more than anything else during a crisis. When we talk about leaders showing up, they're not just showing up early. They're showing up with clarity. They have an idea. They have a plan. It might not be the perfect plan, but it's a plan to move forward. Now, uncertainty in a crisis is a fact of life. We know that. Uncertainty is not an indication of poor leadership, however. It's just an indication of a need for leadership. And so leaders are leading in uncertainty. And what that means is, guess what? We don't have all the answers. I think there's times as leaders, we are highly uncertain. We are in territory we have never been in before ourselves. We've never had a virus quite like this before. Not in centuries, that's for sure. And there is a lot of uncertainty in the air. But uncertainty is different than clutter. We can be uncertain about what's happening around us, but we can be very certain and very clear about hope. Remember, this too shall pass, and because people are not going to follow fuzzy leadership, we have to have the courage to be able to say, I don't have all the answers, but I believe this is where we're going. This is how we can get there. I don't know all the answers, but I do know the direction I think we should be going. And you create the moment, because what happens is clarity helps people prioritize. See, the COVID-19 is a condition that we have no control over. We know that. It's outside of us. We have no control, but we can control the choices we make. And prioritizing what we should do, even in uncertain times, is one of the most important responsibilities of a leader. When we have clarity, we have priority. We show up early, and we show up with clarity. But we also show up with hope. I'm going to read what Jonathan Sachs said, because it's very important about leaders having the ability to show hope to other people. He said that one of the most important distinctions I have learned from Jewish history is the difference between hope and optimism. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the faith that together we can make things better. You see, optimism is more of a passive virtue. Hope is active. It takes no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to have hope. And I love that. We offer hope, not because we're positive thinkers. We offer hope because we're willing to do something together. Now, when we make decisions, especially during a crisis, we need to make it what I call PGE decisions. The P stands for pains. What the potential loss in this situation? What is going to be the loss? Because crisis is about something ending. Change is about something ending. What are we losing? The G stands for gains. What's the upside? Because wrapped in every problem is opportunity. We just have to look for it. So what are the upsides to this? What's the potential win in this situation? You know, one of the things that, if you see the satellite pictures of the Earth, one of the upsides of this is that suddenly our atmosphere is clearing up. I've seen pictures of the skyline in Los Angeles, one of the worst polluted cities with air pollution, and 2 weeks later, they've got blue skies again. It's an upside. Now, how do we maintain that going forward? How can we continue this? So what's the upside? There's always an upside. And then finally, the letter E. It's all about experience. The question for leaders during crisis time is, how much experience do you have leading a crisis? Because in a crisis, intuition, that sense of timing and when to do it, that all comes down to and has come out of best practices as a leader. So what experience do you have that you can bring to the crisis? And what experience are you learning from this crisis? And sharing with people when you make a decision, one, for me, at least as a follower, is explaining why you make that decision. Why are we doing it this way and not that way? Because that, to me, breeds trust and authenticity, that you're not just being a top-down leader. This is what you see as the best way forward. You know, Roy Disney, Walt Disney's brother, he said that when you know what your values are, it's easy to make decisions. And his top values were what's best for the people. And when you think of a leadership in crisis, that is what question is: how are we showing up? What are our values, and how are we displaying that? The decision needs to be always what's right for the people. So you can hold on to as long as you can, but there's a time to begin to open up. And you'll be here to know what your next move is. So I think that's our time. I'm going to wrap it up there, but let me just give you a quick summary of what I covered today. But before I do, I want you to know that I am offering, as I said at the beginning, a complimentary group facilitation of a discussion around this content. We'll discuss what that means to each of us, what it looks like, and how we can apply it to make a difference. Whether you are leading a team or whether just leading yourself, maybe you're just leading your family. These groups are a safe place to share and to grow together, to face this challenge together and figure out how to come out the other side in one piece. So you can connect with me. Oh, I skipped a slide, did I? You can connect with me at my email or on social media. And I'll send you the link and send you the details for that. It's all virtual, of course. And there's 2 times to choose from. It's Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, or Tuesdays and Thursday evenings. So you can pick which time you want to drop in and let's talk about this. So today we defined what a crisis is and then talked about 7 thoughts around leadership. That leadership is about putting others first, do what's right for them, not just necessarily yourself. Leaders must educate themselves with real facts, to be flexible. Number 4, leverage the people around you. Number 5, communicate judiciously. Number 6, be authentic. Number 7, manage yourself. And then I shared 5 observations about crisis. Crisis is much more common than what we realize. A crisis is distracting, and we have to work to maintain our traction, to maintain our priorities and our forward momentum. A crisis reveals the true person on the inside, so we got to work on the inside to get better on the outside. Nothing changes until you change. Crisis requires adaptability and flexibility. We have to be able to dance in the moment. And finally, when real leaders show up, that a crisis is when real leaders show up. That's when people need us the most. And finally, that a leader needs to give people around them hope. That is what they need more than ever. Now let's see if I can Oh. There we go. All right. So did we have any questions there? I don't see anything in the chat. Comments, questions?
Just unmute if you have any questions, please. Okay, all good. Okay.
Oh, good.
Lorna, amazing session. Thank you so much. I love the comments about the leader being able to pivot basically at a time of crisis, because it's nothing worse than when all the chaos is happening and everybody's all over the place and nobody knows, just go this way. And if a leader can really pivot, at least it doesn't necessarily have to be a right decision, but at least a decision.
A decision and a way forward,
right,
and clarity when there is all that chaos.
Love it. Love that comment. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you all for participating today. We're trying to develop as many of these sessions as possible. We don't have a lot of time to come up with a full calendar of events, so we encourage you to check back weekly or daily at our site. On our site, we posted 2 events yesterday, and the first promotion went out this morning. The first session is going to be on April the 28th. It's called Tweaking Your Online Networking with Jen Humphreys. So it's a bit of our networking primer, but bringing it in online with a little twist to the session. We also have a 3-part series, and we're developing a few of these types of master classes, let's say. And the first one is on May 6th. The second in the series is on the 13th and then the 20th. It's digital marketing, a masterclass with Kismet Digital. We encourage you could register for all 3. It's separate registrations for each, or you can register for one session if that's all that you're interested in. If you have an event idea, or there's topics that you're interested that you'd like us to develop, please send me an email. You can find my email along with all of my coworkers on our event page, on our COVID page. If you go to our website, apboardoftrade.com, you'll see the big COVID banner. Just click that. At the bottom, you will find our contact information. You'll also find this, well, in a day or two, this webinar will be also added to on the site, as well as our previous webinars that we ran. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning. As I said, check back regularly on our site. Contact Lorna if you want to talk to her. Reach out to me if you have ideas or any questions. We're doing everything that we can as fast as we can, but information, questions, suggestions is appreciated. Okay. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, safe day, and all the successes possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andra.
Take care. Thanks, Lorna. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.